The observation deck of the stellar haven hummed with the quiet efficiency of a dozen species working in harmony. Mira stood before the industrial cleaning unit, staring at the pile of fabric that had just tumbled out. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. 3 cycles without proper sleep did that to a human. She'd volunteered for laundry duty. It seemed simple enough compared to the navigation systems she'd been studying, the alien linguistics that made her head spin, or the gravity fluctuations she still couldn't predict. Laundry was universal, she'd thought. How different could it be? Very different. As it turned out, the Velthrin linens weren't just fabric, they were semi-organic, responsive to touch and temperature. Fold them wrong, and they'd lock into that shape for days, becoming uncomfortable and potentially harmful to the wearer. The instruction manual had been in 17 languages, none of them English, and her translator implant was still being calibrated. Mira picked up the first sheet, trying to remember the holovid tutorial she'd watched. Corner to corner, then twist? No, fold. Or was it roll? She folded it into what she hoped was the correct shape. It looked nothing like the demonstration. Entropy take it, she muttered, using the mild Velthrin curse she'd picked up. The fabric sat there, accusingly rectangular when it should have been triangular. Or perhaps hexagonal? She couldn't remember anymore. Behind her, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Mira didn't turn around. She knew that particular pattern of footsteps, light, quick, almost bouncing. Rekko. One of the Velthrin cubs who'd attached himself to her since she'd arrived on the station. The young ones were called cubs, regardless of species. A quirk of translation that Mira found oddly endearing. Human Mira, Rekko's voice chimed with that musical quality all Velthrin possessed. You are performing fabric maintenance protocols. Trying to, Mira said, attempting another fold. This one came out even worse, lopsided and lumpy. She winced. Rekko bounded over, his crystalline eyes wide with what Mira had learned to recognize as excitement. At barely 3 standard years old, Rekko was young even by Velthrin standards. All curiosity and enthusiasm packed into a small, furred body. This is... Rekko paused, his head tilting in that peculiar way that meant he was thinking hard. This is the human method? Mira opened her mouth to confess her incompetence. The words formed in her throat. No, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm messing this up terribly. She was tired of being the one who didn't understand, who couldn't keep up, who needed everything explained twice. But Rekko was looking at the mangled laundry with such genuine interest that the words died before they could emerge. Yes, Mira heard herself say. It's a human technique. Fascinating. Rekko picked up one of her poorly folded sheets, turning it over in his small paws. The asymmetry creates multiple pressure points, and this fold here, it allows for better air circulation, doesn't it? Mira blinked. Did it? She looked at her disaster of a fold job with new eyes. The lumpy part did sort of create pockets, and the lopsided corner might actually allow for airflow. Exactly, she said, warming to the lie despite herself. On Earth, we found that perfect symmetry isn't always the most functional approach. Earth wisdom. Rekko breathed the words like they were sacred. May I try? May I try? Before Mira could respond, he was attempting to replicate her mistakes with earnest concentration. His small paws worked carefully, deliberately creating the same awkward angles and uneven folds. The door opened again. This time, 3 more cubs tumbled in: Sina, Vex, and little Tora, who couldn't have been more than 2 cycles old. Rekko, what are you doing? Sina asked, her fur rippling with curiosity. Learning the human folding method, Rekko announced proudly. See? The imperfections are intentional. They serve functional purposes. Mira stood frozen as the cubs gathered around, examining her terrible folding job like it was a masterpiece. They picked up pieces, asked questions, and began practicing the technique with serious dedication. But in nursery, They taught us perfect triangles, Vex said uncertainly. That's the Velthrin way, Rico explained, with the confidence of the very young and very wrong. But human Mira's people survived on a high-gravity death world. They had to develop superior methods for everything. Mira felt heat rising to her cheeks. She should stop this. She should confess. But watching these cubs, these children who looked at her like she held secrets to the universe, something in her chest tightened. The gravity on Earth, she found herself saying, means fabric behaves differently. We had to adapt. It wasn't entirely a lie. Earth's gravity did make fabric behave differently, even if it had nothing to do with her incompetent folding. For the next hour, Mira taught the cubs her method. She made up explanations for each mistake, turning her failures into features. The uneven corners? Better for gripping. The lumpy middle? Allows the fabric to breathe. The twisted edges? Reduces wear over time. The cubs absorbed it all, practicing diligently. Their small faces scrunched in concentration as they deliberately folded things wrong. When the shift supervisor arrived, Mira braced herself for reprimand. But the supervisor, an elderly Velthrin named Kessa, merely watched the cubs with amusement dancing in her ancient eyes. The human method, Recco explained eagerly, holding up his purposefully mangled sheet. Kessa picked up one of the human folded linens, examining it with an unreadable expression. Mira held her breath. Innovative, Kessa said finally. Though perhaps best reserved for practice materials rather than the medical bay's supplies. Relief flooded through Mira. I can redo them properly. No need. Kessa's eyes met Mira's, and in them, Mira saw understanding. The cubs have learned something valuable today. Sometimes that matters more than perfectly folded linens. She paused. Though perhaps tomorrow, young human, you might attend the proper tutorial? I'll have it translated to English. Mira's face burned. You knew. I've been folding Velthrin linens for 70 standard years. Kessa's expression softened. I know what learning looks like. And I know what kindness looks like, too. I know what kindness looks like, too. After Kessa left, Recco tugged on Mira's sleeve. Will you teach us more human methods, Mira? She looked down at his hopeful face, at all the cubs who'd turned her failure into their lesson. Yes, she said quietly. But next time, how about you teach me the Velthrin way first? Then we can compare. Recco's face lit up. A cultural exchange. As the cubs chattered excitedly about what they'd teach her, Mira carefully refolded the linens the correct way, using the manual's diagrams. The cubs watched, equally fascinated by both methods. Perhaps she hadn't needed to pretend to be flawless after all. Perhaps being human, messy, imperfect, still learning was enough.